it sure is nice to come home at the end of a long day and enjoy a podcast. But you know what makes the experience that much better? Relaxing with a few puffs of smoke from my McQueen pipe. At McQueenPipes.com, I was able to find the perfect smoking pipe to suit my nerdy, yet dignified sensibilities. I especially love that each pipe is designed and handcrafted by a true artisan, and that all of their pipes are inspired by fantasy books and movies like The Lord of the Rings. Being a bit of a hobbit myself, my pipe is called the Barrel Rider, but they've also got pipes for wizards, rangers, dragon riders, or even goblins. If pipe tobacco isn't your thing, no worries. McQueen Pipes has got you covered with attachments for vaping or even cannabis. Head on over to McQueenPipes.com and use the code BIOGRAPHERS at checkout to receive 15% off of your entire order. Go ahead, treat your nerdy heart to something you'll cherish and enjoy your podcast listening experience in style with a McQueen pipe. That's Mac like mac and cheese and Queen like the band. McQueenPipes.com and use the code BIOGRAPHERS at checkout for a 15% discount on your whole order. Cheers, everyone, and happy podcasting.
I do hope you can see me today from where you are.
Ich bin untimely.
If I'm generally anything, I guess I'm generally miserable. This modern world of science and invention is of particular interest to women.
The people, I would say, there is no patent. This is, don't you patent the sun?
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace.
Welcome to the Biographers.
Tons of stuff like that. Like, I mean, take Frankenstein, for example.
Sure.
Bride of Frankenstein. I mean, Frankenstein with, what's his name? Willy Wonka.
Oh, you're thinking of Young Frankenstein.
Yeah, Young Frankenstein. That, oh my gosh, so far away from anything that Mary Shelley could have ever possibly been meaning to say about it. The only difference is that the only similarities is that they have like the same names kind of in the same setting, which they don't also. So like, but that's still a hilarious movie.
I guess for me, it would be more akin to being like somebody writing a book and it's called Hogwarts. And it's all about this little shit named Harry Potter who comes and screws up Draco Malfoy's stuff because he's a good kid. And in reality, like his family that believes in white supremacy is actually pretty cool. And Harry is coming over here where he doesn't belong and making... Like, that's sort of
I guess,
how I saw Wicked, which was
fair.
like, hang on, guys. Like, this isn't even your story. Like, it'd be one thing of the original... And I get it. Like... I know I am in the minority here by an extreme amount. It just wasn't for me, man.
That's fine.
I can't explain it.
For me, it's fairly nostalgic because I watched some of the like original stuff when I was a kid, and I really enjoyed. I saw it in theaters at the Kennedy Center in DC with my biological father, and it was a great experience. And that whole summer, my sister and I recited all the stuff, and Idina Menzel was great. My wife, I didn't realize when we saw this movie, had not seen the original. And now she likes the new version better than the original. And I can't be mad because, like I said, we both went to performing arts school. Both of us like know our theater. Shalena is probably one of the best singers I know. So I can't be mad at it, but I want to be mad at it because it's like, dude, you can't like the new one and not have watched the old one. Like, you have to like the old one better. That's the rules. That's how you're supposed to like things.
Talk to all the kids these days that have watched the remakes of
Star Wars.
I was going to say The Lion King and Beauty and the Beast, and now they're doing Lilo and Stitch live action, and they're doing Moana live action inexplicably. Whatever. I can't even. I don't even want to get
I feel like
into
Moana would actually be pretty cool live action.
But what's the point?
Money.
That's exactly right. And that's
As
what
Mr.
makes me
Krabs would say.
upset, is that it's just like, why even do this?
It's a painful money grab, and like, there's really no point to it.
Anyways. Well, hey, everyone. Welcome to the Biographers. You're catching us mid-debate on musicals.
Old man yells at young people for 20 minutes.
Old man yells at cloud.
That's literally us. We're just like two old farts being like, what's wrong with these kids?
I know. Well, I'm Daniel Newman, and obviously with me is Akiva Miola.
Hello.
And we're about to get going into the conclusion of our Marilyn Monroe series. I do hope you all have been enjoying it so far. Fair warning, in my opinion, this is going to get a little emotional and a little extreme, and I will also say that for anybody out there that has any friends or relatives or anything like that who has struggled with or been a sort of victim to drug addiction or anything like that, fair warning, because we're going to be getting into some of that today, so don't want to get anybody too upset, so I just wanted to give you at least a warning on that one.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
we're about to get going there.
Kind of like what we said with Percy Shelley, like, if you're in a place where this might be really intense for you, make sure that you have some friends that you're reaching out to.
Totally. Before we get going, though, as always, if y'all are enjoying the show, we would humbly ask for your support on our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/thebiographers. And I think that's probably pretty much it before we can get going here. Anything else you can think of?
No.
Cool.
Let's ride.
All right, well, let's get going here into the conclusion. Now, last time, we saw Marilyn Monroe's true rise to international superstar, along with all the insanity, hounding from the press, and lack of privacy that comes with it. After a trip to Japan with her then-husband Joe DiMaggio, Marilyn did a series of USO shows for American GIs stationed in Korea. But after some domestic issues with Joe DiMaggio, the two divorced. Marilyn moved to New York, founded her own production company called Marilyn Monroe Productions, and shortly after, married playwright Arthur Miller. After spending some time in England and getting absolutely no downtime from the press or her fans, the two went back to the US, and sadly, on two separate occasions, Marilyn conceived and then miscarried. This resulted in increased drug and alcohol abuse, including several overdoses, states of deep depression, and a period of withdrawal from the public eye. Where we left off last time, Marilyn had just finished filming the 1959 classic, Some Like It Hot, which, despite being a box office smash, didn't do much to lift her spirits. But like always, Marilyn tightened up her bootstraps and pressed on. In early 1960, Marilyn started working on a musical comedy called Let's Make Love. Initially, Gregory Peck was slated to be the leading man opposite her, but once Peck got a week or so into dance rehearsals, he decided the movie wasn't for him and was replaced by a French actor named Yves Montand. Production was typical Marilyn as always, struggling to memorize her lines and constantly late to set. Her lateness was now escalating to a point of utter insanity, as Tony Randall, who had a supporting role in Let's Make Love, would later say, quote, Marilyn would report to work around 5 in the evening. You've been in makeup since 8:30 in the morning waiting for her. That ceases to be amusing after about a week.
Really? 5 in the evening?
So they're there, call time, basically, like at 8 to get their makeup on. So he's like, I'm here at 8. My makeup's on, 8:30. We're ready to roll. Where's Marilyn?
And you have to wait for 8 hours.
Basically, until 5 o'clock in the afternoon for Marilyn Monroe to show up and be like, cool, now I got to get my makeup on and then we can start getting going or whatever.
Absolute insanity.
It's really rude. I'm sorry. It's really, really, really rude. I don't care. I mean, look, if you're an hour or so late because that's just who you are, hey, sometimes I get that. But that's just like...
That's not even something you can plan for. Because like with my buddy Jaden, one of my knife making buddies, he's always an hour and a half late.
Okay.
He's just like a stoner dude, whatever.
Yeah.
So I always just tell him if he has to be somewhere at 11 o'clock, I'll tell him, hey, come here at 9:30. And then I know he'll be there by 11.
Yeah.
But like somebody being 8 hours late, there's no way to like even fake them into being on time.
That's just diva status. You know what I mean? Like it's, anyhow. Now, her marriage to Arthur Miller had also been in decline for some time. And for most of the production of Let's Make Love, Marilyn lived up to the film's title and had an affair with Yves Montand, who was also married.
Oh my God, girl. Come on.
But her private misery was temporarily lifted when, in March of 1960, Marilyn won probably her most respected award of her career, a Best Actress in a Musical or Comedy award at the Golden Globes.
Wow.
Yeah, that was for Some Like It Hot.
That's
so
cool.
That was one of her, I think, only. She won one other, we'll get there in a few minutes, one other Golden Globe, but it was her only actual award for acting from the Golden Globes.
Gotcha.
But yeah, we'll talk about that in just a second. Now, for a year or so prior to all of this, Arthur Miller had been working on adapting one of his plays, The Misfits, into a movie and had finally managed to get a production date set. Despite Marilyn having an affair and Arthur being well aware of it, yes, he knew about her affair with Yves Montand, Marilyn had already been cast in a leading role, and the two were soon off to Reno, Nevada to begin filming.
Great.
So the Misfits, by the way, we'll kind of get into it in a few more minutes, but like he kind of wrote it for Marilyn. So this role that she played, again, we'll talk about it in a few minutes, it was for her. So like there was almost no turning back at this point. And a big part of Arthur Miller selling this to the studios to make the Misfits was like, and we've got Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
So like that was half of them going, cool, yeah, well, we want another Marilyn picture. And he was like, great. And then meanwhile, he finds out his wife is cheating on him and he's like, oh, great.
He's not cool with it. He just has to keep going.
Yeah, more or less, So this movie, by the way, The Misfits, would be her last completed film. Somewhat poetically, she would be starring alongside her childhood hero and the man whom she had for a time thought was her father, Clark Gable.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
But production on The Misfits would prove to be a complete disaster. Arthur Miller was constantly making changes to his original script, and with production just beginning to start up, the film's director, John Huston, was also demanding aspects of the script be changed. Also, regarding the script, the character that Marilyn played, Rosalind Tabor, was very much based on Marilyn herself, like I said a moment ago, almost to the point of cringe. If any of our listeners out there have ever watched The Misfits, you'll know what I mean. Her character makes mentions of a previous divorce, that she never wanted kids with her ex-husband, how her ex-husband treated her, and a large part of the movie centers on the bleeding heart of Marilyn's character, who is constantly trying to save animals, which is also something Marilyn was constantly doing in her life.
Huh. Weird.
So like there are stories of Marilyn walking through New York and seeing people who had like pigeons as pets. And she would be like, I'll buy it off of you for an exorbitant amount. And they'd be like, okay, fine. And then she would just release the pigeon.
That's funny.
So she was that kind of person. Very, very bleeding heart when it came to animals.
Interesting.
So
that's
and
Da Vinci too.
Yeah. So like a big part of, that's a good comparison actually. So yeah, a big part of her was that, and that's also a big part of the movie as well. It's like there are points where in The Misfits, they're trying to, this is so terrible, they're trying to capture wild stallions to make into dog food.
What the?
I'm not kidding. And Marilyn, her character in the movie is like destroyed over this.
That's so
and it's
funny.
just like, please don't do this or whatever. And so like, it's like a big part of the movie is her trying to get these dudes to free these horses that they were going to make into dog meat. It's like terrible.
That sounds like something in a Hallmark movie.
I
It's
know,
like,
right?
Big evil corporate henchman wants to take my stallion and turn it into dog food.
Well, and so I will say it's an Arthur Miller play, so it's very sort of humanistic, right? Where he's like, it's about these kind of old, washed-up cowboys who just don't have that much work, so they hatch this scheme to catch these horses because they can, and then they can sell them to these industrial complexes to make ends meet, kind of a thing. And anyways, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Now, for a method actor like her, it was a movie that constantly forced her to confront her own past and didn't exactly feel like the best time mentally to be doing this. To cope with the mental strain of it all, Marilyn was turning more and more to prescription pills. It was so bad during filming that the other cast and crew members on set would frequently see her stumbling around, and even the camera operator would say, quote, "I can't focus on her eyes. There's nowhere to focus." Which is a haunting idea.
Yeah.
Like like her eyes are so unfocused that he's like, I can't even focus on them in a camera.
That's so weird.
It's like almost creepy to me.
Yeah.
When not on set, even the people of Reno, Nevada noticed her general malaise and unhappiness. At one point, while she sat in a casino staring blankly into the void, one employee approached her to say hello. When Marilyn turned to say hello back, the employee would later say it was like seeing someone smile from a sickbed.
Weird.
So like, think of like a terminally ill patient and they're like, how you doing today? And they're like, good. Like that was sort of the feeling that they were saying they were getting from
Do we know
Marilyn.
what she was taking at the time?
We'll get there in a little bit.
Okay.
Yes, there is a combination of 3 different types of pills, actually.
Gotcha.
So yeah, we'll get there in just a little bit. Now, by the time filming was coming to a close on The Misfits, she decided her marriage to Arthur Miller was too, and would soon file for a divorce. Upon seeing a rough cut of The Misfits, Clark Gable would say it was the best thing he had done since Gone with the Wind. But sadly, he would not live long enough to see its debut. After suffering 2 heart attacks on November 16th, 1960, Clark Gable would pass away at the age of 59, only 3 months before The Misfits would be released in theaters. Before he passed, Marilyn did manage to muster up the courage to tell Clark that he was her hero, but would always regret never telling him just how much of a hero he was to her and what difficult times he got her through as a child. To make things even worse, the press started circulating rumors that Marilyn was somehow partly responsible for Clark Gable's untimely death.
What?
She was completely beside herself when she walked out of her apartment a few days later to hear a crowd of people screaming and chanting, "Murderer, murderer."
That is insane. But for what reason, on what basis do they feel like he would have died as a result of her?
A combination. Well, there's a lot of just fake speculation where they were like, oh yeah, her behavior on set was so appalling that he was so stressed that he died.
Wow.
She teased him sexually and nothing ever happened. So he was so upset by it and distraught that he died. Like all of this crap that was just like, wait.
Death by blue balls.
Okay, that's good.
You're just like, oh, it's disgusting.
Oh man, that was a good one.
That's terrible.
But yeah, so it was all these stupid things, and there really was no truth to it. Nothing ever happened between them. There was no anything. It was like, and don't get me wrong.
I mean, she quite literally looked to him as a father.
Yes, but again, it was one of those where, yes, she was stressful to work with on set, but that is not why he had 2 heart attacks and died. Like, come on, it's just so
Could have
stupid.
been like the 60 pounds of cigarettes that he has a week.
Exactly. I mean, anyways, so sadly, Marilyn started to believe that she did have some part to play in his death and spent over a week locked in her apartment, refusing to see anyone. So really hit her hard. Because, I mean, again, her childhood hero, and people are like, you killed this guy.
It's
and she's like,
Joe
did I
DiMaggio
actually do
said.
this? Yeah, right? They can boo just as loud as they can cheer.
Mm-hmm.
Very true. Now, in early 1961, rumor began to spread that Marilyn and her ex-husband Joe DiMaggio were once again seeing each other. And this time, the rumors turned out to be true, though both denied that anything romantic was taking place. When Joe was interviewed and asked about his relationship with Marilyn, he fell on his sword, admitting that he didn't blame her for divorcing him, admitting he was cruel, and saying, quote, "I'd have divorced me too." So he's kind of trying to be a better guy, which makes me happy to hear.
Yeah, sure. I don't know. I don't have a lot of sympathy for that, but also I'm glad that he's not 100% just like completely oblivious to the harm that he caused. I
mean, look, I think some credit has to be given for a guy in 1960 who's trying to correct behavior that was probably taught to him as a
good thing. I mean, like we just talked about with The Quiet Man. That was the entire plot of The Quiet Man was like, beat your wife and she'll be good to you. Like,
right. So again, we've talked about this in the last episode or whatever. Obviously, no tolerance for somebody who's hitting their spouse, boy or girl, whoever you are. But again, I do think that in this time where socially it was almost accepted, not even almost, it was pretty much accepted that you could hit your wife, and it was like, well, it happens. Sometimes she gets mouthy.
Yes.
For him to at that time go, man, that's not cool. I can't be doing that. That's not okay.
That is
I
fair.
think you got to give some credit to that, you know?
The reason why I would give credit is comparatively, there were plenty of divorced husbands who would not understand why their wives divorced them. So, you know.
And so that's all I'm saying. Again, not trying to condone it or whatever, but it does seem like he's trying to be better, and that makes me happy.
Yeah.
You know,
I still, gosh, Marilyn, please just go live in a cabin somewhere, please. Like everything that she does is, like I said, we talked about this in every episode. It's exactly what she wants, and it's the opposite of what she needs.
I know. It is literally a careful what you wish for, because you might get exactly what you want, and it ends up being poison, basically.
Yeah.
Now, to add to the speculation that they were back together, in late January of 1961, Marilyn traveled to Juarez, Mexico to obtain what is commonly referred to as a Mexican divorce, as apparently their legal system was, or maybe is, I don't really know, usually easier to go through. So a lot of people would do this back in the day when they were like, I don't want to fight the legal system of the United States because it's harder to obtain a divorce. I can skip down to Mexico and be like, hey, divorced? And they're like, done, stamp, and you're good. Like,
Yeah.
you can come back to the US and you are legally divorced. So yeah, that was, again, I don't know if that's still the case, but it was at least back in the day.
Interesting.
But behind closed doors, Marilyn wasn't doing well at all. Thoughts of suicide were growing stronger by the day, and at one point she even stood on the edge of an open window on her 13th story apartment with intentions of ending her life, but stopped at the last minute after seeing a woman pausing at the bus stop below. Marilyn would later say, quote, "I was afraid if I jumped I could splatter all over her, so I couldn't do it."
Wow. Any reason is a good reason. They say that all the time when it comes to like mental health care.
It is. It's just it's almost like the saddest thing where it's like, I want to end my life, but I might splatter on somebody is so like, good Lord, man.
Yeah. Yeah. But like, if you've ever had that sort of level of depression, not to get too personal, but I've been in situations not quite as dire, but I've felt that way before. And like, it can be something as simple as like, I'm going to have to feed my dog and no one's going to be able to check on my dog. And then like, that's enough for you to be like, okay, I guess I'll just go home.
Yeah.
And like, sometimes that's exactly what somebody needs. It's just something as simple as like, I helped do some like crisis stuff when I was in college, and we talk about that where it's like, you can give the very dramatic, what about your family, your children, this and that, but it could be something as simple as like, do you have a pet at home? Like, they probably would like another walk outside, and it can be just that simple. Just be like, okay, well, at least today I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Kat and I have looked at both of our pets, like little Rocky who's asleep over here or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Got me through some tough times, man.
Yeah,
like,
man.
It
can be something really as simple as there's a lady walking down the street and I don't want to cause her distress.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, during her next therapy session, her therapist, Dr. Marianne Chris, recognized just how strung out, depressed, and drug-addled Marilyn was, and after hearing Marilyn discuss her suicide attempt, made the decision to commit her to a mental asylum. Marilyn had gone into hospital care in the past and assumed this would be much the same, but she soon discovered that the hospital she was now checked into, the Payne Whitney Clinic at the New York Hospital, was for mentally disturbed individuals. Pretty much all the horror stories of old mental institutions that you have in your mind right now are almost exactly what Marilyn experienced. Upon being admitted, she was stripped naked, and a male doctor insisted on performing a full body exam, inexplicably including a breast exam. Once this was over, she was thrown into a literal cell. Gray cinder block walls, steel bars, the writings of previous tenants carved into the walls, and a soundtrack that consisted of other mental patients screaming for help or moaning in pain.
Yeah, that's a great way to get somebody to be not depressed.
I know, right?
Lock them up.
Right.
It's insane.
Since Marilyn was a child, she had witnessed her mother's madness and had learned of the various other family members who suffered from other mental illnesses, like her grandmother, who had tried to murder her as an infant, only to die a few months later in a mental institution, if you remember that from our first episode.
Yes.
Her nightmares were coming true, but all of her previous trauma in childhood had prepared her for this. She remained calm, did not fight back, and responded to questions with her usual charm. When one doctor asked, quote, "Why don't you like it here?" she responded by saying, quote, "Well, I'd have to be nuts to like it here." It's pretty cute.
Yeah. That's so weird that she had that chipper of an attitude. Yeah.
Well, it was one of, I think she was smart enough to sit there and go, if I resist all of this and I'm like, no, let me out of here, they're going to think that I'm even crazier. Right. Yeah. And they're going to do even more to me. So she was like,
yeah, you have to remain calm and seem sane. Like I took psychology in college, like everyone does. And I remember in one of the classes they talked about around this time, they did a study where actual psychologists admitted themselves or tried to admit themselves into mental hospitals at the time. They stated symptoms that are not in line with any specific type of psychosis. They'd say, "Oh, I hear sounds sometimes," that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like 80% of them got admitted, despite the fact that the sort of psychology handbook at the time stated that the symptoms that they were reporting were not symptoms that qualified them for being admitted.
Yep.
Right. And then once they got in there, some of those psychology students ended up staying there for up to 6 months afterwards before anybody realized that these people were actually sane and were perfectly fine to go back into regular society.
That's crazy.
It got to a point where one of the professors had to talk to the, I don't know, warden, the staff of one of these mental institutions and get one of the students out.
Wow.
Because they were just so poorly assessing all of these patients. They would just say anybody who had some sort of malady that might make them seem somewhat like a freak, we'll just throw them in a cage and it won't make them, the goal was not to make them better. The goal was to just remove them from society to some extent.
Yeah.
You know,
it's crazy.
Maybe her therapist believed that was what was going to happen. But like for the most part, a lot of it was just incarceration of weird people. So we don't have weird people on the streets.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
sort
know,
of like wash the society.
Exactly.
But after a while, she did kind of start to get tired of being in this mental institution and kind of try to hatch a plan on how to get out there. Getting an idea from her previous movie, Don't Bother to Knock, which I don't know if you remember, we talked about it, was she played a like psychotic nanny.
Yes.
Right? Marilyn desperately tried to force her way out of the hospital by holding a shard of glass up to her neck and threatening suicide. The nursing staff responded by tackling her, heavily drugging her, placing her in a straitjacket, and chucking her into a fully padded room. Just like what you imagine in all the movies.
That's insane.
Seriously.
Yep.
She wasn't initially allowed to use the phone, but one nurse took pity on her and allowed her to make one phone call. The only person she thought to call was Joe DiMaggio. Joe was in Florida at the time, but when he heard Marilyn's sobs over the phone, he immediately jumped on a plane, burst through the doors of the hospital, and shouted, quote, "I want my wife! If somebody doesn't get her out of here, I swear to Christ, I'll take this hospital apart brick by brick."
Aw, okay.
Pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
Come on.
Maybe he'll break into the right door this time. He just bursts through the door at some old lady. You're like, oh, sorry. This keeps happening.
It's like a nursing home and somebody's like, I literally don't know what you're talking about, Joe.
That got me.
Okay, anyways.
Okay.
But only Marilyn's therapist could grant the request. But she did agree to her release after speaking with hospital staff. After almost 5 days of imprisonment, upon her release, Marilyn let fly like Mussolini on the balcony and shouted at her therapist for what seemed like hours. Dr. Marianne Criss was apologetic, but Marilyn never spoke to her again.
Yeah, man.
Thankfully.
Oh my God. Like, you almost like did exactly what would guarantee someone's suicide by putting them into that hospital.
Yeah, dude.
Like, we're going to punish you for threatening to kill yourself by trying to leave. Or by
confiding in me, saying, I've had these terrible thoughts. This is what I've been going through. I actually thought about it the other day. And they're like, great, we're going to chuck you into this loony bin. Like, come on, dude. That basically put the idea in Marilyn's brain. Cool, I can't really trust people with this anymore to many, sort of degrees there.
Yeah, of course.
But a few months after this, Marilyn and Joe took a trip together to Florida. Now, we can only speculate, but it did seem that there was a bit of a friends with benefits situation going on, at least from Marilyn's perspective. Joe had never given up hope that they would one day reconcile their marriage. But it seems that, at least for now, she was quite content to date around and had even secretly been in a bit of a on-again, off-again relationship with one of Joe's longtime friends, Frank Sinatra. The other guy that smashed through the door.
Idiot. Oh my God.
I know. Now, there isn't a whole lot of concrete information about her relationship with Sinatra, and we can only speculate as to the extent of it. But we do know for sure that at one point, Sinatra gifted Marilyn a poodle to help with her loneliness, whom she named Moff Honey, a reference to Sinatra's mafia ties. So mafia, like little mafia honey. You know what I mean? Kind of cute. Now, it was also probably somewhere around this time that Marilyn first met President John F. Kennedy, as she made a comment to a friend saying that she had been invited to meet him in Florida and that he was very kind to her. But as of now, that's pretty much it. After all the drama in New York, she decided to head back to Los Angeles and began settling into a life there. For the first time in a while, she actually seemed to be happy, at least more so than before. Friends that were close noticed the difference too and commented on her looking more healthy. But in late June, while recovering from a gallbladder surgery, her half-sister Bernice, remember Bernice, good old Bernice?
Yeah.
Who had flown out from Florida to help with her recovery, was alarmed to see just how addicted to prescription pills Marilyn had become. Namely, Demerol, which is a narcotic pain reliever, phenobarbital, which is an antidepressant, and Amitol, which is a sedative. So a pain reliever, a sedative, and an antidepressant.
Mm-hmm. And just based on my very small knowledge, my mom was a nurse. Most of these medications are, the derivatives of these medications are like the ones that you would get in the hospital, not necessarily ones you would be taking on a regular basis these days. Like a lot of these are like barbiturates and fairly heavy medications for their class.
Phenobarbital is a barbiturate. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And then also couple this with, she was borderline, if not full-blown alcoholic too.
Yeah.
This is not a good combination.
This would be like if somebody was like doing like ketamine therapy or doing like Vicodin on a regular basis, where it's like, these are medications that are like a little bit stronger for their class. Altogether.
And we haven't even gotten there yet. To say the least, Bernice was worried about her little sister, but didn't really know what to do about it, as the pills were given to her by a doctor. The reality of the situation was that Marilyn was visiting a variety of different doctors, asking all of them individually for prescriptions. And in an age before computer databases, none of the doctors were aware that she was getting prescription medication from different places.
Ugh.
This resulted in Marilyn being able to take larger and larger doses of pills. She had graduated to full-blown drug addict. That's what drug addicts do, man. That's like Matthew Perry, the actor from Friends who passed away recently. I remember he was in an interview I was listening to. He was saying that what he would do is he would go to house showings in the Beverly Hills area, and he would specifically go there to go into their bathrooms and look for prescription medication that he could steal. And he literally said his logic was he would steal it and leave and get in his car and go, nobody is going to believe that Chandler from Friends stole their medication and ran away.
Yeah.
That's just not even going to enter their brain. And he was like, and he got away with it. And that was, and then obviously, tragically, he passed away. And it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was related to his drug addiction. Very, very sad. But anyhow, sort of similar situation. In Ozzy Osbourne's book, which I read a few months back, he did this exact same thing in the UK. He would just go from doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor and be like, oh yeah, I need painkillers. And they would all give them to him. So he would just have a mountain of pills that he could take anytime he wanted. So and he's like, I was the most deplorable drug addict you can find, basically.
Yeah, because basically, and to be fair, the medical system at the time was not fantastic, but at least these doctors would have been smart enough to know, like, hey, if you're on multiple medications, there's a comorbidity with these. Like, we don't want you on this high of a dosage for each one. But just by making them none the wiser, you can just do whatever you want and have as many drugs as you want at a single time, so long as you know what to say.
Totally. But for better or worse, Marilyn was feeling better. So she decided to turn her eyes back to her work and was soon in negotiations to shoot a film called Something's Got to Give. She had also started seeing a new therapist named Dr. Ralph Greenson, though Greenson would later admit he didn't really know how to handle a case like Marilyn. He started using experimental techniques in her therapy, like inviting her to social gatherings, including family functions alongside his wife and children, and even started to encourage Marilyn to abandon her longtime friends for the benefit of her mental care. In my personal opinion, Ralph Greenson is a dumbass, and I believe to be a primary person to blame in Marilyn's eventual death. And a big part of it is her basically abandoning her friends. Like that was him basically, oh yeah, no, they're unhealthy for how you need to progress with your mental blah, blah, blah. So she started to do that, slowly like reject her longtime relationships.
It's really like the handbook of how to get somebody to kill themselves, isn't it? It's
somebody
like,
who's already lonely.
Find an addict, talk to a therapist, have that therapist betray your trust, go to a mental hospital, try to commit suicide in the mental hospital, punish you for doing that, find a new therapist, have that therapist specifically ask you to isolate yourself from your friend group. You know, like you're doing all of the wrong things in like this almost intentional order. Like I think
it's insane.
Yeah, like the effectiveness and these people around her getting her to eventually kill herself is like so effective that you almost think that they're doing it on purpose.
Yeah, it's true. It's, again, that's why I said, like, this Dr. Ralph Greenson guy, I just am like, what an idiot you are.
Yeah.
Like you're abandoning all of your training and doing all these experimental things on her.
They're difficult, so I'm just going to wing it? No, when
That's
it's
literally
difficult,
it.
you do the stuff that you know works.
Exactly. It's totally insane. And then it also it kind of built this really unhealthy reliance on him where he'd be like, you don't need your friends, just come out and hang with my family. Really not cool, because it was also one of those things that was like, well, if you know her at all, you know that like she miscarried several times in an attempt to have a family. And so her looking at you with this family and a happy wife is only going to make her more unhappy. Like, the whole thing is just like, you guys are stupid as hell.
And I feel like, I'm sure we'll talk about this, but I feel like this is just giving a little bit more emphasis on the fact that like the people who are conspiracy theorists about Marilyn and being like, Marilyn didn't kill herself, it was a hit job. It's like, if you saw the progression, like this would have to be a lot. You would have to do a lot of paperwork, and you'd have to have a lot of people lie for you, and you'd have to have a lot of people not tell the truth in order for this to be the case, because there is a paper trail for Marilyn's mental health demise that is so concrete. And like, this is obviously a terrible thing to say, and I would never say it to somebody going through what she's going through. But like, if I was in her position, I don't think I would have lasted as long as she did.
No, I
you know
totally
what I'm saying?
Understand.
Like,
now, I will say really quickly though, although I think Dr. Ralph Greenson is stupid, at the very least, he did care about her.
Yeah, he had good intentions.
He did have the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but he did have good intentions. He was like, he did want to try to see her get better. He was trying these experimental things with the hopes that they would help in this different kind of a way. And that is kind of important to where we'll get to later in the story. But I just wanted to at least throw that out there. He wasn't just this like callous, I don't really care. It was like, no, he was like, well, it seems like you need some family interaction. So how about you just come out and hang with me and my family? And then maybe that'll make you feel better.
In his mind, everything seemed super logical.
It seemed, yes, exactly. But again, it didn't exactly work out that way. Now, at the behest of Dr. Greenson, Marilyn employed a housekeeper named Eunice Murray, who basically became Marilyn's assistant, keeping up her house, buying her groceries, cooking her food, and driving her around town. This was great for her, as she really wanted to focus on her upcoming movie, Something's Got to Give, believing it would be just the boost she needed to get her career back on track. Also at the behest of Dr. Greenson, Marilyn moved into a new house, 12305 5th Helena Drive, Brentwood, California. Which, by the way, as a kid, one of my best friends growing up, William Thorne, he lived in Brentwood.
Really?
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
And that's also where the OJ murder happened, was in Brentwood. Brentwood is like the actual Beverly Hills of Beverly Hills.
Yes. Yeah.
So if anybody is like, oh, Beverly Hills, it's like Brentwood's where it's at.
Yeah, I lived in Beverly and it wasn't awesome.
Right.
It depends on which part of Beverly you're talking about.
Right. Now, her house was a simple 1930s Spanish-style house, the first home she had ever owned, and she loved it. It would be her final place of residence. Fittingly, on the front of her house, there was a tile inlaid that read, Cursum Perficio, a Latin phrase that translates to, I've finished my journey. Just before the new year, in 1961, Marilyn attended a party in New York to honor President John F. Kennedy. This would be the second time they met, and though we really have no evidence one way or the other, some have said this was the first time they spent the night together. I personally don't believe this to be true, because it's just too big of an event for Marilyn to sleep with the president and nobody notice.
Yeah.
But I don't know, right? There's speculation. As 1962 began to roll around, Marilyn did a bit of traveling, first to Florida, then to Mexico. It's alleged that she had a few suitors down in Mexico, but once she was down there, she started getting the idea into her head that she should adopt a child.
Oh, no.
The idea came after meeting an 8-year-old street performer who told her his tales of woe. He claimed his parents had died, that he ran away from his uncle who had forced him to work on a construction site and sleep in a hammock up on the construction scaffolding, and after breaking down in tears, begged Marilyn to let him come stay with her in California. But seemingly, Marilyn just couldn't get herself to pull the trigger and instead donated $10,000 to a local orphanage. And that's pretty much it. There is some sort of like speculation that she still kind of continued and toyed with the idea of it, but nothing ever really came of it. It was just this like, oh, maybe I could do that. Oh, I could save this poor little boy. Oh, I relate to him so much being this little orphan. But then was like, oh, this might be a bad idea.
Well, at least she had some sort of self-awareness there.
I know, a little bit of sense. Now, once back in Hollywood, Marilyn received her second Golden Globe Award for Female World Favorite and began to prepare for her latest project, Something's Got to Give. So I mentioned earlier she had 2 Golden Globes, so this wasn't for a role. It was just like, you're the favorite female.
Yeah.
Which is sort of funny. The film, which began production, would never be finished. It was a comedy about a woman who gets stranded on a desert island for 5 years, eventually getting rescued, discovering that her husband is remarried and her young children don't remember her. So she goes full Mrs. Doubtfire and disguises herself as a Swedish maid in an attempt to get to know her children and win back her husband. Kind of a cool idea for a movie, right? She even started working with a Swedish vocal coach to get a better accent down. In March, Marilyn was invited down to Palm Springs by, of course, John F. Kennedy. The entire trip was surrounded in secrecy, with Marilyn disguising herself on the journey down, but the two did spend a long weekend together. It's also almost definite that during this time, the two had sexual relations, as the two were seen staying in a small cottage together. There was even an instance where another guest at the residence entered the cottage and saw the two of them together. JFK in casual attire, and Marilyn in nothing more than a robe.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Now, I should also say, for anyone that isn't aware, JFK was a notorious womanizer, drug user, and all-around playboy. So him having affairs was far from unheard of. However, it seemed that Marilyn wanted an actual relationship with him, which was way more than JFK was looking for. Marilyn started to feel used and not much more than a plaything. About a month after this, Marilyn was scheduled to attend a production meeting for Something's Got to Give, but never showed. When one of the other producers went to her house to check on her, he found her splayed across her bed, unconscious. She had apparently overdosed again. Doctors were called, and her life was saved.
Oh, I thought this was the moment. I was like,
In May, she was invited to perform in New York. It was in direct conflict with her production of Something's Got to Give, but this wasn't just any performance. She was invited to perform at President Kennedy's 45th birthday party at Madison Square Garden. At JFK's birthday celebration, she wore a skin-tight dress that made her look pretty much naked, and as everyone on Earth knows, performed her infamous rendition of Happy Birthday, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Okay.
Happy birthday to you.
She sounded pretty wasted when she did it too.
She was.
Yeah.
She legitimately was. When she finished the song, Kennedy got up and said, quote, "I can now retire from politics after having had Happy Birthday sung to me in such a sweet, wholesome way." That was my best JFK.
That's pretty good.
It's not bad. It was not bad.
It was better than your Marilyn 3 seconds ago.
Hey, how dare you? Now, what happened later that night? We have no idea. We really don't.
I think we do.
Speculatively we do, but we also don't. We really don't. Like, it's one of those things where she could have been so drugged out that nothing happened, but
it's true.
There's also this whole thing of like JFK got bored with her after a little while and kind of pawned her off over to his brother Bobby, and actually we're going to talk about that pretty much right now. I should also probably mention that it was not just JFK whom Marilyn is alleged to have had an affair with, but also his brother Robert, or Bobby Kennedy. Literally, RFK Jr., the president, or the guy who was running for president this last cycle, his dad.
The guy who's in charge of our healthcare now?
Yeah, that guy. She's alleged to have had an affair with him as well. But so far as I can read, there is even less evidence for this, though many of Marilyn's personal acquaintances around this time later stated that she was much more serious about a relationship with Bobby than with Jack. And that's pretty much it. There are claimed stories like a waitress at a party seeing Bobby and Marilyn in a car together, getting down and dirty, but there really is no proof. That being said, I do tend to believe the rumors, as Marilyn did seem to have a thing for powerful men, and there are quite a few stories that point to her having affairs with both men. Furthermore, as we've seen quite a few times in the past, Marilyn didn't seem to have any moral objections to sleeping with married men.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of got to use Occam's razor on that one.
Yeah, it seems likely to me. Now, by June 1st, Marilyn's 36th birthday, production was back on for Something's Got to Give, though Marilyn made things extremely difficult, constantly calling in sick to work, leaving set early, and needing to retake her scenes way more than everyone else. To be fair, she really was getting sick a lot at this point, but I'd be willing to bet that a lot of it had to do with her collapsing immune system related to her intense drug use. The cast and crew got her a cake to celebrate her birthday, and she seemed happy, but the next day, she was inconsolably depressed. She again missed her call time for filming, and finally, 20th Century Fox had decided they had had enough. On June 8th, it was announced that she was fired, and Fox filed a $500,000 lawsuit against her,
Wow.
equating to about $5 million in today's currency.
Jeez.
She was devastated. Friends close to her were becoming increasingly worried about her physical and mental health, noting that she had lost weight, was generally looking unhappy and tired, and that they feared she was at risk for overdosing on pills again. Her liver was also starting to fail, as the constant fistfuls of pills she was taking were exacerbating her liver, and she was now having liver injections regularly. Now, this will come up a little later, but an important note to remember. Addicts that have a high tolerance for pills have the ability to rapidly digest and process pills. This is similar to alcoholics who also have the ability to rapidly process alcohol, which then also causes liver failure.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, there are unconfirmed rumors from around this time that Marilyn became pregnant, either from John or Robert Kennedy, and that Marilyn had either miscarried or had an abortion. Once again, there is no proof, and we will never know for sure, but there is some compelling evidence out there that does suggest this.
Okay.
Yeah, like, not to get too far into it, but basically there was a point where she went to the hospital, and there is records of it that say she had, like, a sinus x-ray. But the problem is the doctor who gave her this sinus x-ray is a gynecologist. And like, they've interviewed his daughter, and his daughter was like, there's no way he didn't work with x-rays. Period. So for him to have given a sinus x-ray to Marilyn Monroe,
tiny way of saying,
right.
Maybe
it was one of those where it was a way to give a receipt for a medical procedure, but that didn't make it look like that.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Anyhow,
that sounds like it might be highly likely.
Yes. So pretty nasty and pretty, I mean, look, you got to do what you got to do. I'm not going to get into all of that or whatever, but it's more so the whole idea of her being like, shit, I'm pregnant from either JFK or Bobby Kennedy.
I've got to do something about
I got to do something about this is like, oh man, it's just rough. That's all it is. Yeah. Right. Now, as the summer of 1962 went on, Marilyn would continue to fight 20th Century Fox, and by late July, things seemed to be looking up. Supposedly, they had made a verbal agreement to reinstate her contract and give her a pay raise, but there is no record of a contract ever being drafted. Additionally, her ex-husband, Joe DiMaggio, had decided to come back to Los Angeles to ask Marilyn to marry him once again. He would arrive in LA on August 5th, just one day too late. On August 4th, Marilyn would spend her last day drinking fruit juice and speaking to her housekeeper Eunice about various furnishings that were due to arrive at the house from Mexico. She spent a large portion of the day on the phone, though none who spoke to her would later say that anything felt off. She even welcomed a photographer to her house named Larry Schiller, who was representing Playboy magazine, believe it or not, and trying to convince her to pose for an upcoming issue. At around 4:30 p.m., her therapist, Dr. Greenson, came to check up on her and would later note that she looked drugged and depressed. But after her therapy session, she spent the rest of the evening alone in her bedroom. Around 8:30 p.m., she spoke with a longtime friend named Peter Lawford, who was JFK's brother-in-law. Peter would later say it sounded like Marilyn's voice started to, quote-unquote, fade out, with her final words to him being, quote, "Say goodbye to Pat, say goodbye to the president, and say goodbye to yourself, because you're a nice guy." At 9 p.m., her housekeeper, Eunice Murray, would be the last to see her alive. Marilyn had been invited to stay at her therapist's beach house with he and his family, and when she came out of her room, she said to Eunice, quote, "I think we'll not go to the beach, Mrs. Murray. I think I'll turn in now." She would go to sleep sometime on August 4th, 1962, and never wake up. She was only 36 years old. Now, the circumstances surrounding her death have been hotly debated for over 60 years and have given birth to a myriad of conspiracy theories ranging from the CIA assassinating her as revenge on JFK for how he handled the Bay of Pigs incident to Robert Kennedy ordering her assassination because she was a communist sympathizer and was going to spill the beans on their scandalous affair.
That's funny.
Now, I'll admit, some of the details surrounding her death are a little strange, but strangeness does not equate to conspiracy.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we know? Well, at approximately 3:30 a.m., Eunice Murray awoke, went to check on Marilyn, and saw that her bedroom light was still on, but her door was locked. Eunice then called Dr. Greenson, who said to go around the back of the house and look through her bedroom window. When Eunice did this, she saw Marilyn lying in her bed naked with the telephone receiver in her hand. Eunice called Greenson again, who hurried over to the house, broke into Marilyn's bedroom through the window, and when he tried to remove the telephone receiver from her hand, discovered that rigor mortis had already set in. This is where things get just a little fishy. Rather than calling 911, Dr. Greenson called Marilyn's personal physician, Dr. Engelberg, who came over and confirmed her death. It wasn't until 4:25 a.m. that they would finally call the police department to notify them of her death. After an initial investigation was done, death by suicide was reported as the cause of death due to an overdose of pills.
Do you think the overdose was intentional?
I don't.
I don't think so either.
Just based off of everything I've read about her, I just don't think so.
There was a goodbye call a little bit, but normally, and it's not a rule, but a lot of the times when people are getting ready to commit suicide, they will start giving off things, any mementos that they might have, kind of making their own sort of deathbed sort of arrangements. And I don't see Marilyn doing that necessarily.
Yes, I completely agree. Now, does any of this suggest a massive conspiracy or cover-up? In my opinion, not really. It suggests close friends who needed a moment to gain their composure before dealing with the inevitable media fallout that was about to ensue.
Yeah.
When Marilyn's autopsy was performed, strangely, no pills were found in her stomach. Many conspiracy theorists have pointed to this fact as evidence that she did not commit suicide but was murdered. But remember a moment ago when I said that heavy drug addicts have the ability to digest and process pills at an alarmingly fast rate? That is almost definitely what happened here. Now, I know that conspiracy theories are really good at tickling your brain, but think of all we have learned about Marilyn Monroe over the course of this series. All of the abuse she suffered, her constant battle with drugs and alcohol, the handful of times she had contemplated and attempted suicide, the multitude of doctors she would visit to obtain an unhealthy and illegal amount of prescription pills, the handful of times she accidentally overdosed and was seen stumbling around on movie sets due to her inability to control her drug intake. I ask you, what makes more sense here? A massive conspiracy involving an assassination plot and government cover-ups? Or a traumatized, mentally unwell woman who suffered from extreme depression and drug addiction, who finally took one too many pills in one go and died? Just like we have seen with more recent celebrities like Tom Petty, Prince, or Heath Ledger.
Yeah.
In 1982, the LAPD would reopen the case of her death, and though they would admit there were unanswered questions, they agreed with the original findings of the investigation and closed the case once more.
I think maybe the only thing that I could think of is the fact that the doctors didn't call immediately might suggest that perhaps she was mostly dead and they tried in some way to resuscitate or revive her and they failed.
Yeah.
And perhaps she wasn't dead when her therapist found her originally. But that still doesn't suggest, you know, Russian spies or all the other stuff that they say about Marilyn's death.
Now, I will say some people have speculated that she had tried to call the president or Bobby Kennedy and either didn't get through or didn't get words that she wanted or whatever, because apparently once the investigation got opened up, her phone records were sealed.
Yeah.
And then that's where, again, conspiracy theorists point to that and go, see, they were trying to hide this, blah, blah. And I go, look, I get that, but I also think it's much more likely that they went, shit, if she tried to call the president, maybe let's just keep that off the record. Yeah. Because it just doesn't look good regardless.
I mean,
right?
We're also talking about the same, we won't get into the Kennedy assassination, I imagine, but, you know, we're talking about the same time where the CIA had a couple of missteps and had done a better job at cleaning up after themselves than preventing things in the first place.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but if I was a part of the CIA or the Secret Service and there was somebody who had sexual relationships with the president that I'm sworn to protect and take care of, I would make sure that if there's any loose ends, I would tie them up immediately just for national security purposes.
Yeah, I think that is the most likely scenario. I don't think that it was some big cover up or anything like that.
Yeah,
So,
this was unfortunately and very sadly a long time coming.
I agree. And it's just what makes the most sense? A long-suffering drug addict who was going around town to different doctors collecting just an exorbitant amount of pills. Yeah. Exactly. It's just that she could take 10 pills in one go or whatever, and then was maybe having a nice relaxing day and was just let's chase that high. Yeah. And then at nighttime was okay, just a few more because I really want to numb the pain. And then her body said that's enough. Mm-hmm. It sucks and it's sad, but I do think that's the answer here. I don't think it was some crazy thing.
And I've heard a lot of therapists talk about sort of substance abuse and whatnot. And the general consensus that I hear is substance abuse. The main issue is not necessarily the substance. That's the solution. It's a painful solution that ends up killing you.
Yep.
But it's the solution to a pain that causes you to take substances, right? It's not just the medication is the side effect of a person's mental being, and this is how they've learned to cope with it. It's not necessarily the disease itself.
Yeah.
And I think Marilyn is a really great example of that because that was the way that she coped. She tried therapy. They locked her in a fucking dungeon.
Yep.
She tried therapy again. They told her to go excommunicado with all of her friends and family. She tried to pursue her life's dream of working in Hollywood only to find more molestation, more sexual assault.
People accusing her of murdering her childhood hero.
Exactly.
Come on. It's just
every step that Marilyn had tried to take, obviously she could have made better decisions. Of course, everybody can. But every step that Marilyn tried to take to make her environment safer had led to a worse scenario. Oh, yeah. I'm poor. I'm an orphan. I want to be, and I was abused as a child. I want to be a Hollywood star. Oh, Hollywood happens to be filled with probably the largest amount of abusers in the country at the time.
Yep.
I'm mentally ill. I should try therapy. Therapy put me in a padded cell where
in a literal straitjacket.
The only way that I could think of getting out was by threatening to kill myself. I should be married. Okay, I got married to a guy who beats me.
No.
There are so many instances where all of her decisions were really just trying self-preservation, only to find out that the world wasn't quite as kind as it should have been to somebody like
100%
Marilyn.
agree, man. And it's just sad. It's sad all around.
Whew.
But once news of her death spread, her funeral was arranged for August 8th, 1962. She was laid to rest in a crypt at the Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in a small private ceremony, which included her half-sister Bernice and ex-husband Joe DiMaggio. Joe really did love her to the bitter end, and before her casket was closed, he kissed her repeatedly, saying over and over again, "I love you, I love you, I love you," which makes me misty. I'm not going to lie. For 20 years after her death, Joe would send roses to her grave. He was the only one of her ex-husbands that would do that. Only a small amount of people were allowed to attend the funeral, but thousands of fans paid their respects by lining the streets surrounding the cemetery. But after the ceremony was over, the fans could contain themselves no longer, breaking into the cemetery and stealing roses that were laid at her grave. Even in death, she could not escape the insanity of her own popularity. Since her death, her legacy has lived on in the hearts of millions throughout the world. Her movies are still watched to this day, and though almost everyone fails, people still try to replicate her style and fashion sense. She was an early pioneer for the film industry, for the advocacy of therapy, for speaking up about child sexual abuse and the concept of method acting. She was born into circumstances that stacked the odds against her, but followed her dreams with such intense and unrelenting determination that she became the biggest star of her day and cemented herself as one of the biggest stars the world has ever known. In total, her films have earned more than $200 million, converting to over $2 billion in today's currency. Personally, I will never be able to see her the same way, and as a conclusion to the series, it seems only fitting and illuminating to read these lyrics from the Elton John song, Candle in the Wind. Goodbye, Norma Jean. Though I never knew you at all, you had the grace to hold yourself while those around you crawled. They crawled out of the woodwork, and they whispered into your brain. They set you on the treadmill, and they made you change your name. Loneliness was tough, the toughest role you ever played. Hollywood created a superstar, and pain was the price you paid. Even when you died, the press still hounded you. All the papers had to say was that Marilyn was found in the nude. And it seems to me you lived your life like a candle in the wind, never knowing who to cling to when the rain set in. And I would have liked to know you, but I was just a kid. Your candle burned out long before your legend ever did. Goodbye, Norma Jean, from the young man in the 22nd row who sees you as something more than sexual, more than just our Marilyn Monroe. It's emotional, I told you. It makes me a little teary-eyed, I'm not going to lie.
It's a beautiful send-off, Daniel.
Thanks, man. And also, do you know that song? Have you heard that song before?
I've never actually listened to it.
You got to listen to more Elton, and that one's one of his all-time classics.
Yeah.
And it's amazing because I've known that song since I was a kid, but yeah.
It's an excellent summary of pretty much exactly what I said, like of what we've been talking about for the last 6 hours. She tried to find support, but just support wasn't there.
I know.
Like to some extent, we as a society failed her, which is ironic because she was our idol.
Mm-hmm. I know. It's this might be the roughest ending. It's up there to me with Franz Liszt's death that was so like drawn out and painful, but this is one of those that's like, it wasn't just that, oh, your final days were, like Franz Liszt, he had a bad 2 days or whatever it was and then died. This was like
Marilyn had moments of happiness interrupted by years of pain,
of suffering and pain and drug addiction that ultimately led to this sort of untimely demise, man.
Mm-hmm.
And it just,
and of course, like obviously, like anybody on the planet, she could have made better decisions for herself. But at the end of the day, she was looking for stability. She was looking for a way to live a normal life.
And she was looking for help. And it just seemed like every time she went to the best of the best, they were bad for her.
Yeah.
And that's why I said, like with Dr. Greenson or whatever, him, I think being one of the people to blame, that it was just like, yeah, man, in those last moments or whatever, there was fewer and fewer people that you were able to call and talk to and get help from because you had fucking encouraged her to stop talking to them.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, it makes me sad.
And having a therapist, that's what the part that really was jarring, is having a therapist suggest anything like that. Even if your friends are terrible friends, just having somebody to witness you in life is so important. I can't remember what movie it was, but they were talking about, what's the whole point of marriage or friendship? And it's not just enjoyment. It's to have somebody witness that you exist.
Yeah, totally.
And like lots of people knew that Marilyn existed, but how many people knew Norma Jean did?
Totally.
Very
few, All right, well, that's going to do it for Marilyn Monroe, everybody. I know it's a little bit of a somber note to end on, but I do hope you enjoyed the series. I know that I enjoyed it, at the very least, learning about such an insanely huge icon who was not at all what I expected. I didn't expect to find such a multifaceted and complicated person. And I don't know why. I think it's because there's almost this weird image that got created in my head through media and t-shirts and entertainment or whatever that did kind of suggest this sort of one-dimensional kind of plastic dumb blonde. And hopefully I helped to dispel that in your mind as well, that was not at all the case, and that she was a whole lot more than that, and seemingly a very beautiful person who really had a tough go of it throughout life, and unfortunately sort of fell prey to a lot of these things that we are still dealing with as a society, and the opiate epidemic that we're still kind of fighting to this day. It seems like she was one of the weirdly like original victims of that to some degree.
Yeah.
Right? The prescription drug sort of thing. So anyhow, hope y'all enjoyed. I know. How else am I supposed to get in there? So sad.
I hope this made you feel
good. It was fun.
Thanks for crying with us today.
Well, to spin it into hopefully a more positive note or whatever as we sign off on here, again, wanted to let everybody know we're going to do one episode of Office Hours after this for the kind of the month of December 2024. And then we're going to take 2 to 3 weeks off. I'm kind of leaning more towards 3 weeks because I just need a break, everybody.
I'm leaning towards 3, dude.
It just...
I'm moving shops and I'm moving houses this month.
And it would be really nice to have just a little bit of a vacation for a little while. Again, I have been at this for a year and a half with really no break. Year and actually maybe even longer than that. And then Akiva's been at this for over 9 months without a break. Mm-hmm. And so it would be pretty nice for us to just chill for a little bit here. So don't think we're going anywhere, just taking a quick break and a little brain reset and everything like that. So wanted to give everybody that fair warning. But then I'll also tee you up to give everybody a little teaser here. Who are we covering next, my friend?
All right. So I think we've gotten to a point a little bit where maybe some of our viewers are able to discern who is a Daniel character and who is an Akiva character. And I think this is kind of perfect for my sort of special interest here. Before we talked about humanizing a character like Leonardo da Vinci, we see him as this wizard that looked through time, when in reality he was just a person who was very aware of things around him and was very curious. And I was trying to make that point with people who were visionaries, inventors. With somebody like our next biography, I think I might have to rescind that statement, because we're going to be talking about somebody who was a genius from birth, saw visions in his mind of how his contraptions were going to be created, had prophetic dreams of how his designs were going to change the world, and even predicted things like Wi-Fi.
Wow.
Our next biography is going to be on Nikola Tesla.
Yeah, a name that everybody knows, even if you don't know it.
Exactly. The inventor of AC electricity, the thing that powers your very house, the first designer of wireless transmission, which is, how you are hearing our voices today.
Yep.
I think he's going to be a really interesting character, and he is a bit of a wizard. So if you are looking for that inventor that does actually have a mystical eye into the future, I would say that Nikola Tesla is going to be your man.
I'm excited.
It's going to be complicated because we're going to be talking about electricity, so I'm going to do my best to try to dumb down very complicated things that most of us take for granted on a daily basis. But I really think you guys are going to enjoy the life of Nikola Tesla.
Woo! I'm pumped. I feel like I want to get back to a science man. You know what I mean?
Yes, because it's been a little bit since then. I was going to do, and we're still going to do him at some point. I was going to do Louis Armstrong, but Daniel and I talked about it, and it was just so close in theme and time period as Marilyn.
Yeah,
and also I think he would make a fantastic Daniel character because he has that sort of Jack Daniel young kid who's just gonna make it happen sort of energy like Jack Daniel did.
And I also told this to Akiva. You guys let us know because I want to know what you think about this. I think doing a Louis Armstrong impression would be cool and funny. Akiva says it's racist.
No, I don't know. Okay, not only is it a little racist, but really what it is, it would be like nails on a chalkboard. If I came up and every time I was like, well, yesterday I went to the, and like, no one wants to hear us do that.
That sounded more like Fat Albert.
whatever. No one wants to hear that. Whether it's politically correct or not, either way, it's bad. Like, he sounds fine because that's his voice. But if we do an impression, it's going to be everybody is going to shut off the episode immediately.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe we'll throw in, if we ever do it, we'll throw in like 1 or 2 impressions just to like kind of get somebody to laugh. But if we did every quote like that, that would be that would be awful.
I would have to do at least 1 or 2 impressions of Louis Armstrong over time, but whatever, all good.
Yeah. But anyway, our next character is going to be Nikola Tesla. And I will say, for you guys who are itching for some biographies while we take this little break, we just had our Spotify Wrapped, and there are a lot of episodes that some of our new listeners today have not taken a listen to.
Yep.
And I'm sure either one of us can give recommendations. I would say my favorite one still has to be, for me, Leonardo da Vinci, and from Daniel, I really, really enjoyed the story of Ian Fleming.
I agree. I would also say, especially for people that are more interested in American history, Mabel Dodge Luhan is a great one. I was talking to, again, giving a little shout out to Bonnie, my friend who also listens to this show. And she was saying that she feels like she knows American history and never has heard of Mabel Dodge Luhan, and the amount of people that she influenced.
It is our most popular series, by the way.
Yeah. So if anybody is curious about that, go check her out as well. But good call out there. So I guess we'll wrap things up. But again, thanks everybody for listening to the series and the show. For anybody that's wanting to support us, you can go to patreon.com/thebiographers, which seems to be picking up some steam. And we're making a little bit of cash there, which is pretty sweet.
Making it happen.
You can also find us on social media. We're going to be on places like TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. Generally going to be at The Biographers. For any questions, comments, corrections, suggestions, whatever, you can also shoot us an email at thebiographerspodcast@gmail.com. And like always, for anybody that is interested in any type of metalworking or specifically bladesmithing or custom chef's knives, anything like that, go check out Akiva's website. That's going to be Metalwork by Meola, MEOLA.com. And you can use the code biographers at checkout to get 10% off of your order.
Mm-hmm.
Anything I'm forgetting?
I would say one more thing. I am going to be moving closer to the Denver area, which means more classes, which I will be teaching at Hardy and Fuller in downtown Denver. If you've ever wanted to learn how to do any bladesmithing or blacksmithing or knife making and sort of put in that blood, sweat, and tears to make your own hand-forged knife, I would highly suggest you take a class from me. Once again, that's Hardy and Fuller.
Sweet.
Yeah.
You can learn from the best.
Yeah, the best, maybe specifically in that one part of town.
All right, well, I think that's going to do it, everybody. Thanks again for listening, and do remember, as always, ignorance is not stupidity, it is the absence of knowledge, and I do hope you all learned something today.
See ya.
You've been listening to The Biographers. For more information, please visit thebiographerspodcast.com.